when I came home, for me, it felt like suddenly time had stopped. Time for humanity had stopped. I believe that it's because I still hang on to the faith that government and business with the IPCC report that was really blatantly, all the science were there, all the scenarios were there, would change something. I think when I was there, I realized, no, it didn't change anything. Mm-hmm. And if that doesn't change anything, time really stopped, and time really stopped for me.
I'm Dean Walker, and welcome to the Poetry of Predicament podcast, a podcast for people brave enough to face humanity's challenges and problems, and most importantly, our numerous predicaments. The Poetry of Predicament is a podcast meant to inspire us to bring forth grace, beauty, and connection with the web of life in the face of a predicament-laden world. This week in the Poetry of Predicament podcast, we welcome Malika Virah-Sawmy, who is a scientist, a mother, a woman of color, an active member of the Deep Adaptation community, and for me personally, a dear friend and a trusted advisor. I think it would be very wise to listen to some of the sharing from Malika as she shares her experience in the recent COP26 meeting and so many other aspects of our world. Please help me welcome Malika Virah-Sawmy. Right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast. I am your ever-present host, Dean Walker, and speaking to you in the middle of January 2022 from Southern Oregon, where it's a peaceful, chilly morning. And I am really pleased to have as a guest someone that I met a couple of years ago. I guess it's almost 3 years ago. And we'll be going into the details about that in just a little while. But Malika Virah-Sawmy, so dear to have you here. Because of how we met, there was just such an opportunity to meet each other of the approximately 20 of us that met at what I think was the only full-length, meaning approximately a week-long residential introduction to Deep Adaptation from Jem Bendell and his then partner, Carr. They facilitated a workshop for us in Greece, and you and I were part of the bundle of people that came to participate in that. And it was really a diverse crowd from all over the place, and a number of different fields of expertise and interest. But what we had in common is this notion of that we are facing, and to some degree or another present to right now, the human-caused collapse of Earth and human systems, as I might put it. And we each came with our different experiences and different, perhaps, ideas of what we might be gaining from spending that time together. And it's been way too long since I've had a chance to speak with you at length. And so I'm really looking forward to this, both personally and also for the people who might watch and listen to our conversation. I think you're bringing some remarkable elements to your work And I look forward to hearing whatever you'd like to share with us about your time in Glasgow. And truthfully, I'd be just as interested in whatever you'd like to share about, what it is to be a mother in these times, and what it is to be a woman in these times, a woman of color in these times. There are so many elements that are really prominent in our experience for those of us who have our eyes open to it. And I just think you bring a remarkable ability to articulate those perspectives and more. So welcome here. I'm really, really glad you're here. And I look forward to sharing a little bit with you. And more importantly, at this point, you're sharing with all of us. So, hi.
Hi, Dean. Wow. Yes, it's been a long time, 2017. Our first kind of experience on collapse at the time. And since then, it's almost just been like being a bit like riding on a meteorite. Mm-hmm. Suddenly it was like the wake-up call, realizing we're on a meteorite. I'm sorry to take up the metaphor of the film. I haven't watched the film, and people just told me that the film is about that.
Yeah.
But it feels like that just suddenly pop, waking up during that collapse, reading Jem's paper and meeting together for that workshop of coming together. And then since then just too many things happens to show, like the kind of directions. Yeah. But the transition was not like a soft transition. It was like, boom, wake up, and that's it. Yeah. That's how I feel.
And you mentioned 2017. I believe it was 2019 that we were in Greece together.
Oh, 2019. Wow. Even more recently.
Isn't it incredible? It seems like it's been much longer than 2 years for me as well. Malika, I was wondering if you would share with folks, how would you like to be known? Can you give us an introduction of who you are, and how did what you do in your life, how did it draw you into the conversation about deep adaptation? And was your occupation, your study, was that an influence in having you come to Greece a couple of years ago?
I would call it more my purpose. I grew up on a small island in Mauritius, and from a young age, I wanted to talk. I felt really connected to nature, and my passion was to talk to animals and plants. And I felt really connected, so I want to work on nature conservation. And of course, coming from a small island with a lot of deforestation, incredible amount of pollution of the sea, I was very sensitive to ecological degradation. And also how difficult it is to restore things. I started to study sustainability because I felt really driven. More and more, I realized that I didn't grow up in an indigenous kind of way. I grew up in an Indian society that was displaced from India, sent to Mauritius to work in the sugarcane field by the British. So I'd lost a lot of my indigenous traditions. Or also, as displaced people don't have a long connection to that nature because it's new. So I could sense nature, but no one was teaching me how to deepen my connection with nature. I went to study, eventually got a scholarship to study in Oxford. And I did my PhD on nature-human conflicts. And after a few years of working and all this training, I really realized that I realized I was perpetuating a mode of being, doing, and relating that was part of the problem. And that I was really heartbroken because I had given my heart. I'd worked for many years for WWF, you know, everyone is in love with, you know, the panda, you know, like, and realizing for me that the way they were operating, the way of doing, being, relating in the organization was part of the I was heartbroken. I really went into a depression. That was 2017. I think that's why I remember. And I left my work. I realized that I was meeting people that I could really relate outside the sustainability field. So that was, you know, indigenous people, artists, dancers, like that, people that could really deeply relate. And yet, so I thought maybe I just chose the wrong career or the wrong tribe. So I went, as part of my deepening journey, I started to deepen with this group. And then I came across Jem's work that took me back to sustainability, but other things as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that workshop because we used the work that reconnects, which is a practice using mindfulness, meditation, mindfulness, shamanic practices. And I remember I did a practice with you, Dean, that stayed so much in my body. So I'll say to this audience, it's a Hawaiian practice called Ho'oponopono. So it's asking for forgiveness. So there was an inside circle and an outside circle. So I think I was in the inside circle. You were. And you were I was facing you. And I had to ask you 3 times. So the Ho'oponopono is, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And we had to say that I had to say that 3 times to you. And for me, it remained such a powerful experience because I was very angry at climate change. I think I told you that a little bit. You do. And now I had to say that in front of a white man. You embodied the white man, and this.
I still do.
But it was such an important practice for me to stop this separation mindset, to realize that no, there are things to be forgiven. Yes. That even being in a separation mindset. And it was very powerful. And so what I'm trying to say is being exposed during that journey after my depression to practices like that really helped me to reorient myself again. You know, I still deeply care about the earth and bring back the practices, the tribe that I love, back to that practice, and not do it and not feeling because I can't do it the old way, the way it's being done in the mainstream, it means I'm irrelevant.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I appreciate this. This is a bit more of the history that you bring than what I knew before. And I'm excited to hear about that time of transition, that time of inner conflict, of having to confront the possibility that this organization where I'm trying to make a difference is as saturated in the business as usual colonized thinking and being and presence as the rest of the world. I can only imagine how heartbreaking that can be, how deeply frustrating that might be. I've encountered layer upon layer upon layer of that similar kind of realization long before I got into the full engagement with collapse, with the facing the predicament that we're in, and so on, and providing the work that I provide. And I'm I think it might be another call, and I'm hoping that we might have another call at some time in the near future, where I'd like to explore some of the more detailed, more high resolution realizations that you've had about that. I could say that we all have that colonial shadow in us, even the people who are activists and they get up in the morning and all they want to do is just make a little bit of a difference in the day, in their little organization or whatever it is, and they just don't realize that they're as saturated as anyone else in the things that got us here. So thank you for bringing that up. And I just want to kind of put a placeholder there for possibly an in-depth conversation. I didn't mean to stop you. You had gotten to a place where you were just really appreciating certain process pieces in, for instance, the work that reconnects that Katie brought to the facilitation of the workshop, the introduction to deep adaptation that we're both talking about. Was there more you wanted to say about that kind of process work? Was there anything else that you wanted to explore or detail for us about your experience there?
No, I think it's one of the, they say that one of the laws that you're going in the right direction is the law of synchronicity. I think it was like working on collapse, these approaches coming together. So I would just say it's like, law of synchronicity at that moment, having left something and encountering something new.
I'm curious if you might continue your story after leaving the Greece course, the Deep Adaptation course. Can you speak about what sort of work you're doing at that time, and how did it shift? How did you shift? What was the path like after that course time?
Yeah. So just before, maybe one story. So we did a lot of storytelling or sharing our experiences. And I remember clearly, I had lived in Madagascar for a number of years, working for WWF there. And I was working in the south where there were regular droughts. And it was very clear at the time that the droughts were due to climate change. And the landscape, the huge landscape, was becoming less and less livable for people. Really, like the growing season was really shortening. The rainfall was very unpredictable. And during that Greece retreat with Jem and Katie, I realized how much grief I had about it that I hadn't released. It was in the unconscious. And that was really important for me because I realized that I had suppressed a lot of my grief around what I had experienced. And also I was working on conservation. So it was really difficult how to tell people not to cut forest when, there was huge droughts, and it was a real dilemma at the time. And I felt very, very lost and confused. And you couldn't in the organization speak about your emotional, the emotional side of not knowing what to do at that time, So I think allowing the grief, like allowing the emotion as a guide, like has kind of guided my work since then. Yeah, maybe I'll post here. Dean. Maybe I'll just ask you how you have like how the work on grief and experiencing grief is also shaping your work, has shaped your work right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking that. And it is a cornerstone piece, and it's intimately connected with a couple of other strong pieces. One is just exploring the idea of one of my mentors in this kind of work speaks about how we've become a flatline culture. Obviously started or dominated by the USA, but really across the world in the business as usual culture. I would say that what got us into this global predicament is that we most reward the people who have completely disconnected from the primary sources of meaning and relationship in life. And one part of that is we've disconnected from the full range of our feelings, core feelings. And grief I would consider to be really perhaps at the center, because it is such a universal experience, and it goes so deep in the human experience. So it is a part of the more advanced levels of the work that I offer. at the more entry level is just to know that there's a safe place where I might feel anything in the face of the global challenges, the whether it's climate change or it's some other critically urgent and important environmental measure of our impact, of human impact. It could be politics. You know, there are so many existential level challenges for us. And so as a person enters the work that I'm doing, I try to give them a sense of a path that they might want to take steps on. You know, different people will feel comfortable at different levels of the path. And grief tends to be a few steps further on the path. And the path could start with what they're doing in the deep adaptation community of the deep relating type work, or the work that reconnects is also, I would consider, just more toward the entry level work, where people can just find out that they're not alone. Yeah. And that they can actually feel some of these more difficult feelings, and they won't have to be gaslighted or argued with or made wrong or fired from their job or have their family reject them, which I think we both know these are all things that can happen to people who try to express in some communities some of their concerns. So thank you for asking. That's how grief fits into the work that I do, and in my own experience. I've actually had a lot of engagement with both hospice care work and also grief facilitation, and it's hard for me to explain how very, very important it is. I think that there's a very large possibility that our unmetabolized grief, you know, we're a grief phobic culture for sure in the USA and beyond. And
so I'd like to share a story, because I think it became apparent to me also in later on, because after when I left Madagascar, I did realize that grief was the grief that I had been holding in my unconscious, but that was making it where is in my conscious, was actually influencing my next step, even in relation to Madagascar. So when I finished my work with WWF, I did a large piece. I looked for funding for a large piece of research, social science research on how people were experiencing climate change, what were the water issues, because and it might just look as if it was like, okay, like it's from curiosity that this, pushing for an understanding, but actually it really came from the grief, from the emotion, from the grief. I felt that in my work there, I couldn't resolve it because we really didn't know how to do it. But if I asked if I could do more anthropological work, could we find some more answers, like co-create some more answers with the people. So I just wanted to highlight that we might think, a lot of people think that grief is a burden, is a negative, like we are paralyzed by it, but actually often the more I have allowed it to, sometimes it is paralyzing, and we have to go through the paralysis to know what is the next step of what to do. And that was for me the next step that I did. And later on, when I presented my work, people said for the South, this was one of the important, piece of research to understand, like some of the conflicts around water that was happening. But I stopped there right now. Well, I'm speaking as a scientist and a practitioner right now, at that time in the conservation field.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this is where you want to go, but I'm wondering if this would be a good bridge to what you did at Glasgow. And if you could say more about that type of facilitation, that type of work that you brought there, and what else brought you to Glasgow?
So Glasgow, the climate summit, it's very interesting. So when I was doing my PhD in Oxford, so that was in 2000, around 2010. So flashback 10 years earlier. It was in the Environmental Change Institute. So that's where all the climate scientists are. So everyone went to the climate summit. It was the place to go if you were credible, if you were. And it was a very interesting time because I was just starting in my career, or I had already worked in the field. And we knew the science where we were heading, but to go to the climate summit was like kind of a promotion ticket. It was a party there. It was a big, how do you say that, happening on climate change.
Sure.
I find it really difficult to connect to climate change at that time. I felt like everything was technocratic. It was not about nature connection and all that stuff. So I was like, okay, if I want to do nature connection, I'll work on nature conservation. That was a direct connection. Now, fast forward, I decided not to go to the COP because I felt it didn't do anything for me. It made me only more stressed. So I went to a few COP at that time. I went this year after 7 years of avoiding to go there, because I was invited to facilitate deep listening, deep relating, deep reflection for the Institute of Sustainability Studies, where I have a fellowship right now. It was challenging for me to go there because I know the COP, it's like a big, somebody described it, it's a big trade show for sustainability. It's noisy, everyone is selling how great they are doing. So I went there, and it's like we were creating a small temple within that big machine. That's everyone is busy, well-dressed, You know, if you're there, you're a delegate, you know, like, so you're important. It was very hard to hold the energy of the temple. And
Yes.
at some point, I asked myself whether it's the right space to have a temple there.
Yes.
A lot of young people came to share their confusion, you know, the how do you say that, everything that they were feeling, you know, like the surrealism of that, you know. It was so devoid of emotions. The only emotions that you could feel was when the indigenous people was walking through, you know, to go to the stand. There was like a symbolism and energy and emotion.
Yes.
Our little space were very small. So, but hearing the story was very emotional for me, because people say, especially young people, and one person shared that they feel it's a funeral that nobody can see. And yet the young people were saying, you know, like, why were we invited? You know, like, it's a bit, at the same time, you know, like, everyone wants to do something, so they perpetuate this model of going there, and year after year, it's the same thing, you know. So where do I want to go with that story? I think for me, it was very difficult to know. It's a question I still ask myself, you know, can we create a temple in that machine? Actually, I was with a group and we all had to ask ourselves whether this was the right thing to do, because we felt this was a machine that will try to continue things as it is, you know. It's going to make declarations after declarations and declarations, and everybody, you know, it's not that people aren't doing things, you know. Yeah, there are some cool little green projects, but not at the scale that is needed. And yet, because we do our little thing, we hang on to this thing that, yeah, but we're doing our good. And I'm saying that some people are really trying to do something, but
Yes.
I think it's because we're not letting the emotions in. We can't admit to ourselves, how Jem described it, the avoidance. What does he call it? The avoidance of experience. We can't admit to ourselves it's not at the scale required to change direction right now. Yeah, and I notice how entering that space, it's even the way they organize it, you know, like there's no attention to deep love, deep care. There's nothing. You queue for hours to enter that space, and then it's just like business as usual, people walking in. It's like, is that the space for looking after the planet? Nobody looking in the eyes, no noisy, everyone selling something, everyone in little boxes, in little stands in the green zone. Of course, we don't know what's happening in the delegation. And actually, this year there was hardly any interactions between the civil society and the space of the delegation. The whole, yeah. So it's like someone described it as it's a space, it's a machine, and it has no roots. It's just concrete, and that's how it is. Yeah. So for me, it was very difficult outside. When I saw the activist, I felt a bit like a traitor for being in there. But at the same time, I kept on convincing myself that I was creating a temple in it. And that I'll stop with how it was for Glasgow.
If it's okay, I'd like to just slow down for a moment here. I'm very moved by what you're sharing, and I feel a similar kind of connection. I was shocked by the level of connection and love present in the moment that you were describing so well when you and I really met at the workshop in Greece, that, you know, facing one another. And we have this moment is set aside for exactly what we were doing. And we both had that opportunity to exchange such a pure conversation, such a pure offering from in each direction. So I just draw a thread from there to what you're describing, and that the two phrases I've heard you say are that COP26 is a funeral that no one can see. So I'm just slowing down to really let that just penetrate a little bit. And so I can feel in my system an upwelling of tears. Just now as we're speaking, and it's kind of a shaking in the center of my body. And you also mentioned another statement of something about this COP meeting as a machine with no roots. And another question of, does this reflect how we are treating our planet, how we're treating ourselves as we gather in this kind of kabuki theater that's clearly has no connection with actual caring or actual sincere action of any kind. So I'm just slowing down to let each of those penetrate a little bit. And I'm wondering if you would have anything more just from yourself about either those statements or anything else that you're describing for us about your experience, either then at COP or now.
So there were two things that really, from those three metaphors that I used, that really disturbed me afterwards. I was with a German team there, and all of us had this question whether it was the right thing to do to create a temple in a machine. And one of the German researchers had studied a lot the period of the Nazis. And one famous researcher, I don't know her name, like very well-known Nazi researcher, and she said the only way that you could continue, that the Germans continued what Hitler told them is by they kept them busy. They just kept them busy so they didn't have to think, they didn't have to do emotions, they were kept busy all the time.
That might be Hannah Arendt. That might be Hannah Arendt.
Yeah, Hannah Arendt. Yeah, that's she. And she said she felt like that. And that really, and then I think Hannah Arendt said evil has no roots. I think this was one thing that she said. When she shared that, I'm still digesting that. And I thought of Greta's word. She said, I want to believe that you are not evil.
Yeah.
That continues to work on me. When I came home, for me, it felt like suddenly time had stopped. Time for humanity had stopped. I believe that it's because I still hang on to the faith that government and business, with the IPCC report that was really blatantly, all the science were there, all the scenarios were there, would change something. I think when I was there, I realized, no, it didn't change anything. Mm-hmm. And if that doesn't change anything, time really stopped. And time really stopped for me. or Time for Humanity, I felt like there was still the clock, you know, like the Extinction Rebellion has this, how do you call that, Sen timer. The Sen with, you know, like suddenly I felt like I was in a warped time, in a timeless space. And I think I feel like that these days. I feel like there is no, I'm in a timeless space now for humanity. So I think at the beginning I shared with you, I feel a bit chaotic. I feel like I cannot predict what tomorrow will be. I cannot say who I'm going to be tomorrow even. And I think Glasgow precipitated that to me, also precipitated a certain belief that I had that government and business could still shift things. Yeah.
What comes up for me when I hear you sharing this, before I was mentioning about the kind of entry level of the work that I offer, and it also just reflects my own progress in practices. And toward the more advanced end is the ability to completely let go of outcome. You know, I know that this is not new in, you know, the wisdom traditions. This has been a core component for thousands of years, but it's no small thing now for someone to really get to a place of releasing outcome, releasing hope. That's a word that so many people hold on to. And one part of that kind of far end of the practice, people who are sincerely practicing to be more and more present in the face of larger and larger stressors, and to be able to let go of outcome in the middle of that. It can be an extreme experience in my system. In fact, I like to call it a liquid state. And it's, as far as I know, it's the liquid state is part of the uncertainty that our culture seems so terrified of. The last thing we want to do is touch the uncertainty. So we hold on so tight. This is how the world is, and this is how it's going to go. And we'll have the biggest military and the biggest corporations and blah, 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 blah. And so to release that and to be able to truly let go it can be far more than being seasick. It can be this disorientation that I don't know where I'm standing. I don't know where is up or down. And the art involved with that and that set of practices is to befriend it, befriend the liquid state, to know it well enough to know that I probably will not be destroyed, just obliterated if I lean into it instead of running away and withdrawing and rigidly holding and so on, to lean in to the liquid state. And I don't know if any of these words resonate for you, but it seemed like you were describing something like that because you still have a busy life and you still have kids and you've still got to be a presence in their lives that somehow invites them to live fully into their lives. So I'm curious if this sparks you to say anything from your experience.
No, I really love how you describe this state. That, you know, that state of letting go is disorientating. It's like being liquid to frame ourselves. So to at the same time, there's this liquid state. At the same time, yeah, it's one of the, you're absolutely right. All the Western practices talk about letting go, letting go of outcomes. Mm-hmm. But letting go of outcomes doesn't mean letting go of trust in myself, in each other. So I think often people make the mistake seeing that the unknown is something, you know, like, you know, this hopelessness that they, you know, like it's this kind of, often people say, but if you don't have hope, it's hopeless, you know, but actually having no hope is hope-free. It's being free of a rigid state. In that liquidity, you have actually more ability to move when you learn to trust that you are not solid, but you are not nothing either. And maybe you are, even if you were nothing, you are something. I don't know, it sounds a bit, for me, I have to keep, actually, I feel like sometimes I just don't know what I'm going to do with my life because I can't plan for anything. I don't know where my income will come, you know, basic earnings, how this will come because I'm an independent and I want to match the work, what is needed at this moment in time.
Yes.
And the only practice I can do is trusting that if I am in the right direction, I am growing seeds, there will be abundance in my life. You know, I will, you know this quote that a great wind will carry me in the sky. Yeah. So I have to practice. I think like this practice of trust.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. I was taken back to, you just mentioned about Hannah Arendt and one of her quotes about fascism and how it can really sweep through collective consciousness. And one way that it does that is to keep everybody busy and distracted, and keep the whole machine moving fast. And there's a phrase, and I'm sorry, I don't know who originally coined it, but that there's a beauty in living life at the speed of trust. And that's what I was hearing you describe, that it seems like the place where you're landing is to be able to see that speed and that churning and that distraction of the world and the machine and the life that you're carving out seems to be more in the neighborhood of living life at the speed of trust.
I think what I wish it was like that. I would say every day I have fears, you know, fears of everything, fear for me, for my family, for the planet. And the only way I can relax into the fear is to practice trust. And I wouldn't say I don't have fears, you know, like I'm in nirvana. No, I'm not. I have, yeah, I think it's, there is a lot of fears and I can only, if I don't want fears to take over me and I'm paralyzed, the only way is to just practice trust and see its face in an email I get, in a relationship that I have, you know, keep on recognizing its face in the opportunity that I get. This is the face of trust.
Well, I don't know if this is a good time for this shift, but I'm aware that we have one final official meeting of the people who went to this introductory week-long introduction to deep adaptation 3 years ago. And it's coming up next week. And unfortunately, you were saying that you've already got another event to go to, and so you won't be there. But I know that you're going to contribute in some way with perhaps it's a poem or something to be able to send to the folks. I'm curious, as you look at that little pocket of the people that were in Greece at that course, from all different places and walks of life and fields of study and so on. I'm curious if you have any message for people, whether it's this small group or the other people you know that are on this path of just doing the best we can each day as we face into this extraordinary present and future. I'm curious if you have any message for, let's just say it's to the Kalikalos people. That's where we were in Greece. Do you have any message from your heart to ours that we can carry along for them?
Thank you, Dean. I think there's a beautiful Charles Eisenstein has this text at the end of the book that he converted into a video. I think it's called The Tribe. I don't know if you've seen it. In the end, he says he has this, like a lot of people have, like in the past have started to feel this grief. And then suddenly the threshold of people meeting each other in that space is growing. And he said it's from that, a threshold. I feel that a bit in my life, sometimes I feel like, how could I just have woken up 2 years ago? Because everyone, like I'm just meeting like-minded people. That's why I thought it was much longer that we met, Dean. Then I'm like, am I living in a bubble or is that a threshold happening? My message, I think my message is that we, it's just 2 years, but we are reaching a threshold of, it's through these interactions that something happens, And the other day I was talking to someone who will work, with the parliamentary people on climate change on the emotional side. And I just wrote, she said, let's create a peer group to work on that. No, a supervision group. And when I reread what she said, I didn't see supervision group. I saw supervision. And then I understood, we keep ourselves little. We put supervision, to help each other, what we are going to do. But actually, it's not, it's a supervision. And this has happened through that threshold of growing large enough to be able to support that supervision. I think something quite incredible is happening, like a planetary initiation. And we are, like we are holding that space for that. And we don't know. We don't know because everything seems so forbidding right now. Yeah. But if we think of it as we're holding space for a planetary initiation that has never been possible for humans so far, then we know one has to be so grateful that we were given the chance to be born in this time and to be awakened in this time. And that's only 2 years ago.
Yeah.
For me, at least.
Yeah. Well, Malika Virah-Sawmy, it is such joy to connect with you and learn pieces that I didn't know from our first meeting, and the lovely, lovely pieces you've shared about the time since then. Especially, I so appreciate getting a more personal and intimate sharing about the recent COP meeting and your insights and realizations out of that. Somehow it's both freeing for me and validating for me to hear what your experience was, being thousands of miles away, and I just felt my own version of grief and the impossibility of anything changing out of that environment and so on. So I just so appreciate your sharing and your extraordinary ability to articulate and articulate not just from the verbal, but also from the heart, perhaps from the soul as well. It's really just been a pleasure. I'm hearing my words, and I'm a little concerned that I'm sounding like I'm saying goodbye forever, and I do not intend to say goodbye forever with you. But I just feel like there's you've brought us a lovely sharing of experience that very few people get to be in the places you've been, and particularly around that pivotal time at the COP. I think you bring us an extraordinary view, and it's just a joy to talk with you, connect with you, and thank you so much for being willing to be a part of this kind of conversation so we can share it with other people.
Thank you, Dean. I'm sure that we will continue the conversation around what it means to be a mother. So, in this time, I'm still exploring that myself.
Yeah.
And I want to know about your work more.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that we could have a conversation, restart the conversation, or recontinue the conversation that started in Kalikalos.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh. Okay, we're back.
Ready?
Yep.
Oh.
Familiar faces, worn out places, worn out faces, threatened early for their daily races, going nowhere, and their tears are filling up their glasses. No expression, no expression. Have my head, I want to drown my sorrow. No tomorrow, no tomorrow. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, 'cause I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Mad world. Mad world. Children waiting for the day they feel good. Happy birthday, happy birthday. Made to feel the way that every child should. Sit and listen, sit and listen. Went to school and I was very nervous. No one knew me, no one knew me. Hello teacher, tell me what's my lesson. Look right through me, look right through me. And I find it kind of funny, I find it kind of sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had. I find it hard to tell you, 'cause I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Mad world. Mad world. Ow!
Thanks for watching another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance, www.livingresilience.net. Music today from Michael Hedges, as always, and also Port Blue Into the Sea. Also available on our website, www.livingresilience.net, is a wide array of articles, online learning series, arranging group and individual resilience coaching, and sign up for our every other Tuesday free support group that we call Safe Circle Calls.